Om Shanti. A very good evening to everyone, and welcome to the Brahma Kumaris regular Friday talk. On behalf of the Brahma Kumaris, Leicester and Harrow, I extend a very warm welcome to all our participants, viewers, and listeners through the various platforms that you're using. And today we have a very wonderful guest, all the way from Sydney, Australia. I think it's 7 o'clock here, as you know. But in Australia, I would imagine it's about 4 o'clock in the morning. So we'd like to welcome Maureen Chen, a well-traveled individual, and who seems to have a hint of Chinese in her surname. Maureen has been practicing and teaching Raj Yoga for some 45 years and is very well experienced in this art of Raj Yoga meditation. And her book, The Mystic on the Edge, has just gone online. You can purchase the book if you do so on Amazon, and also the Brahma Kumaris InspiredStillness.com. So this is really her story, and a very good evening from UK, Maureen Ben, and I assume it's a good morning from you from Sydney.
Yes, it's lovely to be with all of you, and thank you for inviting me to cross over the whole ocean.
So
In a
has the
second.
sun risen, or is it yet to rise?
No, still just 4 a.m.
Oh, wow. So what's the weather like there?
It's a lovely autumn. Yeah, so far it's very gentle and very beautiful and colorful.
Do you live in the city or a little bit outside Sydney? Because we see Sydney as quite a cosmopolitan city.
Actually, I'm right down in Melbourne, so I'm 1.5 hours outside the
Oh, right.
city on a 40-acre property, surrounded by native bushland and kangaroos, wombats, koalas. Just incredible to be here. Well, I've only been here a year. We are being kind of gifted a retreat center, so it's a very beautiful experience.
Okay, we'll have an opportunity to listen to Sister Maureen, and hopefully at the end of her talk, we'll have a few questions. So over to you, Maureen Ben.
Thank you very much. So lovely to be with all of you, and interesting where this topic came from. I was asked to give a talk in a pub. I think it's the one and only talk I ever gave in a pub, and the topic was Mystic at the Edge. And so I've done retreats, and when I wrote a book, I thought, yeah, I quite think that fits for me. But just to explore a bit what this means. So I would say that becoming a mystic starts with what they talk about, the third eye opening. So we go along with life and we just get told, generally told what to think, what to do, how to dress. You know, it's generally quite prescribed for us. But I think for many of us at some point in our life, we start to open our eyes and think, what's going on? Where am I? What am I doing? Where do I belong? So, I think this is where it starts. It starts often in a state of chaos because things aren't working as they're meant to, as they're prescribed for us. We might feel we don't fit in. We might feel we're not satisfied, that there's got to be something more. So it often starts with chaos. And then we look for something, some wisdom, some people who we might be able to align with. And we might find ourselves, like I did, searching in many different ways for a meditation practice or what I would say was truth. And so pretty much shopping for what might resonate. And for me, after a few years of that, it was with the Brahma Kumaris. And as was mentioned, I've been on the journey with the Brahma Kumaris now for 45 years. And what happens, I think, when we do find our clan, our tribe, our people, and the teachings that really resonate with us, sometimes we also get into another kind of a sleepwalk because we can become institutionalized and try to fit in there and try to do what we're told. And, just like we did before, we follow the same kind of training that we had of trying to belong. I think the time of the mystic starts when we question again what we're doing. But now we have a grounding. Like I would say, this wisdom has been a grounding for me now to question and explore. I've got a background, I've got an exposure to so many people and ideas. And so when I start to doubt and question, I think it's with a lot more clarity and wisdom, but still more chaos as well, more chaos. And I would say the result of that is becoming a mystic, because we don't want to be a follower. We don't want to believe blindly, but we want to experience. And I, started off as an atheist, part of that questioning, I guess. I couldn't understand what I was being taught. I couldn't understand how God would create a world with so much disparity. I couldn't understand how people were saying God gives happiness, God gives sorrow. So I thought, no, I don't really want to go along with those ideas. And so Buddhism attracted me for a while because it was a path of transformation without having to believe in a God. So I traveled that path for a while. But I think what's really behind also this mystic is awakening to the experience of the divine. And I would say a mystic generally has a passion to experience, not just believe, but to know firsthand what the experience is of a relationship with the divine. And so, this has been the main part of my journey, or the background to all that I explore. And I do explore. I read lots of books and about self-development, and I still have a respect and an interest in the practices of all different faiths, because I just want to increase my experience and my practice. So I've dabbled into Islam a little bit because I ended up in Pakistan for a little while. Of course, in 30 years in Asia, I still continue to explore the teachings of Buddhism and the practices, because there's a lot to learn from all great wise masters. So the mystic, and the mystic on the edge, actually it's not on the edge, that sounds a bit precarious, it's at the edge. So what it means is that I stay on the edge. I don't get settled into any position. So I've not really enjoyed being in comfort zones, because I find they put me to sleep. I don't progress if I'm in a comfort zone. So at the edge kind of means always ready for something new, a new experience, a new idea, to jump into something. So being at the edge is, to me, adventurous and explorative. So this is where, that topic, because I was given the topic, but this is where I think I found it had a lot of resonance with the way I live my life and what I was seeking. I think most of all, a mystic has an antenna for tuning in to what they feel is truth. And of course, that's very personal, but I feel that that's the core of it, to really, as much as possible, live truth practice truth, act in truth. And sometimes that's very precarious because, we have to take risks when we live our truth or what we perceive to be our truth. But I think along the way, the experiences help to guide us and to give us faith that the path that we're on is working. So what my experience of that, for one example, I feel that whatever is meant to be, my experience is that what's meant to be does come to me. And I remember once I was in the other retreat centre in Australia for a while, and I was offered a car, we were offered a car by the organisation, and we didn't really need it. We would need it soon because the car that I was driving was very old and not great, but it was okay. But I knew the other retreat centre really needed a truck, like really, because they had big grounds they need to look after. So in honesty, I said, we would appreciate the car, but I think the other retreat centre needs a truck. So, giving that to the other retreat centre. And I just had this faith that when we really need it, we will be offered one. And it was amazing. This little car, started to leak in the rain and make noises when it turned corners. And I just had the thought, now we really need a car. And within 48 hours, and for me, it's nearly always 48 hours, it's not usually longer, somebody offered us a truck as if we needed a reminder. And we sold that and got a very good car. So it wasn't getting the car that was the great thing, but having that affirmed that if I do what I feel is right, it will always work. And that's been many years, so I just try to always remember, have faith in this and live by this. So that's one of the ways we start to align with what is truth. Another is, really just, there was a line that I read from the teachings of Taoism, and it said, few leaders realize how little they have to do. And for some reason that resonated with me very deeply. And instead of having expectations and thinking too much, for me it's holding a thought and believing if this is the right idea, the right thought, it will manifest. So not worrying about how to achieve or who's going to help, just holding the thought. So few leaders realize how little they have to do, for me meant having right thought. And I'll tell you, the first experience of this was connected with the UK. It was when Oxford was opening. It was the first retreat centre, I believe, outside of India. And I was living in Hong Kong. I'm a volunteer. I don't have any money. And I just felt that I'm meant to be there at that opening. I want to be there. I'm meant to be there. So I booked a ticket. In those days, you did that. You could just book a ticket and do all the planning later. So I booked a ticket and I thought, well, I don't know how I'll get there, but I just feel I'm meant to be there and I'd like to be there. Again, within 48 hours, one of the students said to me, I'm taking my daughter to summer school in the UK. Would you give me company? And she offered to pay the ticket. And I said, what date are you planning to fly? And can you imagine, it was the date I booked. And then I thought, oh, this is wonderful. So I've got my ticket, but if I'm taking her offer, I'll probably need to give her company. And can I attend the retreat centre? But as it turned out, she was busy and she came to the retreat center and spent a few nights with us there. And it was just amazingly perfect. And this is my experience again and again and again. Just have the thought and let it happen. So I've dabbled also in quantum physics, in neuroscience, and of course there's a science behind this. And that's why I like to study these things, because it's not just chance. And what that means is any of us can do this. It's not that I'm special. It's not, something magical. It's actually got a science behind it. So another aspect is coincidence. And it's kind of aligned that when, we have these thoughts, coincidences happen that align. And some people don't believe in coincidence. They say it's synchronicity. So, things just aligning like that really make life very magical. And sometimes it's the smallest thing. Like in Hong Kong, we have to give coins in a little box to get on the bus. Well, we did in those days. And I was just 10 cents short. And if I didn't have the 10 cents, I would have had to put a few dollars, a $2 I had. But as I was standing in the queue and I was checking, the coins I had, I looked down at my feet and there was a 10-cent coin. So I was so happy. It's such a small thing, but it's like the universe has got your back. That's the experience when you start to experiment and experience how life can be so magical. And I would say mysticism is experiencing that inner magic. So coincidence, synchronicity, and another thing is this protection. So yeah, I just feel protected, and I often find myself in a situation of protecting others. So that's very interesting. It's two-way. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in a queue or in a crowd, and it seemed like, and mostly this was in China, where I used to travel quite often when I lived in Hong Kong, but it was just interesting that I found myself in a crowd that was quite dangerous even, and I just felt I was there holding a space of calm and protecting those around me. Very interesting. I won't go into the details, but just interesting. So not only are we protected, but we also protect others. And then as we progress and we develop that relationship with the divine, what I also experience is what's called touchings. Getting, it's almost as if I hear words, but of course there's no sound and there's no visual, but so clear. And just to share one of those experiences, I was looking after our national office in Sydney, and I just got this very clear voice come into my head: go to Taiwan and open a center. It was not on my mind at all, not on my radar, but it was so clear. And it happened to be when our regional director, Dr. Nirmala, was in Australia. And so, she was in Sydney within 48 hours again. And I said to her, I got this, touching, if you want to call it that, to go to Taiwan and open a center. What do you think? And she kind of said, oh yeah, okay, like a bit like that. It wasn't sounding like there was any support in terms of, oh yes, and we'll support you in that. No, it was just like, well, if you think so, give it a try, that kind of thing. But because it was such a clear touching, I lived, as I said, in Hong Kong for many years, so I rang the coordinator of the center there and I said, I am going. I'd already decided, I am going to Taiwan to open a center. I had really no money. I speak only a little bit of Chinese. I only knew one Indian person staying there. And yeah, but I'm going to Taiwan to open a center. And her response was, oh, that's amazing, because there's a lady here who's been offering financial support to someone who'll go and open a center in Taiwan. I didn't know how much, but that was good enough for me to say, yep, something's flowing. And then I called another person I knew in Taiwan, and she's Taiwanese. Sorry, she lives in Hong Kong, but she's Taiwanese. I'd taken her to India, and we had a good relationship. And I said, I'm going to Taiwan to open a center. And she said, you're the only one who can do it. And I thought, wow, how interesting. So I said, okay, then you have to come with me. When can you take some leave from your work? So I waited for her for 2 months until she could take leave, and we met at the airport. I stayed with her family for a week. Within that time, we rented a center, we organized a program. So 1 week to get all that organized, 1 week to organize a program, and 28 people came. So it was just happening. And after 2 years, we had 2 centers in Taiwan, but unfortunately COVID hit, and I'm now back in Australia, so still hoping to get back there at some point. But just how things happen. And even there, I don't speak much Chinese. I can't teach in Chinese, but I feel so connected, and so much happens, and it's mostly on a vibrational level. I feel the people there just get me. I would say even more than they get me in Australia, they just get me. And we have a very close spiritual rapport and a trust between us. So I don't know how things worked there, but it was also a good experience of the divine working. So I never felt it was my idea. I know how to do this. I can do this. No. I'm willing to do it, but I can only do it if I let the divine act through me. And that's also part of the experience of being a mystic. I think surrendering and allowing that higher being to do the work, and not being concerned and over worried about how I'm going to do it, because really I didn't know what I was doing. For the 2 years I was there, I didn't know how it was all going to work. I didn't even know if we could pay the rent for the next month. But it just was such an amazing experience that took me closer to God and closer to being a mystic, because it was just really out of my hands. And so, yeah, that whole thing of surrender has a lot to do with being a mystic, because as long as I get in the way, I'm limiting what can happen. And I'm sure you can all relate to that, because, you know, I have my capacity. Yeah, I mean, it's something, but it's nothing compared to that unlimited potential that can be tapped in on. So it takes a little courage. I imagine myself arriving at the airport with all my belongings at the, you know, without any money and not knowing where to go. But still I was willing to go and even start like that. I had so much faith. And of course, it worked having the 2 months, because when people came to know that I was going, they also supported and they gave money. They said, this is for the center in Taiwan. And so when I got there, I had $2,000 so I could furnish a little apartment. Barely, but yes, it all happens. And yeah, I think the other big aspect of walking the path of the mystic is we learn to follow our intuition. And I've been doing this also for many years, but in particular, I was living in India for 4 years, helping with a project called The Future of Power. I lived out of a suitcase and traveled in 50 cities organizing dialogues. This is 2010, so not that long ago. And after 3 years, just intuitively, I was enjoying it. I was having a great time. I loved the team, no problems. But intuitively, I just felt it's time to leave. And I said to, the one who was the coordinator, Nizar, I said, I'm going to leave after 1 year. So I liked that I could give that much notice. So I said, I'm going to leave after 1 year. And, I just had an intuitive feeling that that's what I need to do. And I followed it, even without knowing. So I do that. And yeah, I keep doing that. I just do what I feel intuitively to be right. And life is good. So yeah, these are some of the thoughts on becoming a mystic. And another thing I wanted to talk about is where it takes us. Opening the third eye helps us to kind of detach ourselves from this world. In fact, when we become the observer living in this world, we see a lot. We see much more than the two eyes can see. We perceive what's going on, and we kind of live in this world, but are not of this world. So I noticed after only about a year of practicing meditation, I realized one day that, I was walking along the street and I realized I'm here, but not quite here. I'm the observer whilst walking and seeing. And I felt, wow, that's a really comfortable space to be. It's a much safer place to be, because when we are the observer, we have a little buffer between ourselves and what's going on. So these are the things happening, but when I have that little bit of space, then I'm able to stop and think and act. I'm not right up against the situation. And I realize this is like we used that word before, protection. This is like a protective force. It's almost like a force field that I create around me, that there's a little separation between myself and life. So, and it came quite naturally, and I'm sure it has for you also. And maybe you're not quite aware of it, but that buffer really helps me to stop and think and act, so I don't react to things and I don't enter into situations that I regret, that are not comfortable, that are confusing. So that little buffer is very, very important. So when I start to open the third eye, I start to feel this separation, little separation, and that I'm choosing more than falling into situations and reacting to situations. Not always, I'm afraid. Sometimes I do, and I always regret it. So I like to keep that buffer always there, that I can stop and think and act, that state of being the observer. And in the Brahma Kumaris, we talk about being bodiless. And I remember Daddy Janki once saying that we need to practice being bodiless all the time, because we never know when we'll need it. And there was a man from India, who came to Hong Kong, and very happily on Diwali, he went to the local swimming pool, but he took his glasses off, of course, to swim, and unfortunately, he dived in the shallow end. and broke his neck. He was in so much pain. And I was encouraging him. He was a practitioner of Raj Yoga, and I was encouraging him to detach from the body and trying to help him to be bodiless. But it was really a big lesson for me. Would I be able to be bodiless in that situation? So yeah, this space of being the observer and learning to detach from the body is so very important. I'm sure all of you have your experiences of when it has worked. There's a very famous Qigong master in Australia. He was very young. He had a bicycle accident. He went straight into a truck and he was all broken, his legs and arms. And what was interesting, he was in a state where he wasn't in a coma. He could still communicate, but he wasn't taking painkillers. He was somewhere. And that awoke his curiosity. Where is that place? Because after 10 days, he came back into his body and he was in so much pain. But it made him think, where was that place that I was still in the body and yet I didn't feel my body? So that's what we need to be able to access at will. We need to explore and discover how to get to that place that's beyond the body. So this is being bodiless. Very important to practice this. So that led him to meditation, Qigong, and they were trying to tell him that he won't have a normal life, and he's only 19, but he's somebody who does medical Qigong, so he helps other people with cancer and all kinds of illnesses. But that 10 days of discovering that space is the basis of the work he does. And so we all need this, because we don't know when we'll be in a situation that we need to be able to really remove ourselves from our body. So the state of being bodiless is that state of being the mystic and being able to create that state at will. Because we could have a trauma, like I know another lady who got kidnapped. Well, she didn't get kidnapped. She was a yogi. And interestingly, the equivalent, like in English we use this word mysticism for the one that experiments with what's beyond the physical. The equivalent of that in Asia would be the yogi. The yogi is the one that experiments and goes beyond, goes within the laboratory. So it's really the yogi. So this lady, she was being kidnapped and she created the consciousness. Actually, she was in South America, but she created the consciousness, I am Kali, the goddess of death, very powerful. And she didn't do anything. She just created this consciousness of being Kali, being fearless. And she said when she sat in this awareness, they were tying her up, her legs, her hands, her mouth. But she said when she created this consciousness, she could see that they weren't very confident. They were becoming a little clumsy in the way that they were doing this. And so she felt it was working because they were stumbling a little bit. And then they had to find the key to the getaway car, because she was quite well known and her car would have been recognized. So they were supposed to find a key to the getaway car, but they couldn't find it. And they were cursing and swearing, and ultimately they had to leave her because they couldn't find that key. So probably she created that situation. But what was great is that because they didn't tie her well, because she's, as she said, they're a bit clumsy, she could get out of that. She could pull off the tape around her mouth and, get inside and call the police. So a wonderful experience of saving herself from being kidnapped. However, what happened is, she lived in a country where kidnappings were quite common. So what went through her mind was what could have happened if she had been kidnapped. And as you can imagine, that could be even worse than being kidnapped, because you can remember so many scenarios and put yourself into that state. So she was left with quite a serious trauma that affected her mind. And if she could have been bodiless, she wouldn't have had the impact. And this is what I remember Dadi Janki saying to me, because I went through something and, I felt nothing. I thought, oh, that's really interesting. There's no impact of this situation. And I thought, wow, that's really great. But later it came and I was emotional and, there was a state created. And I shared this with Dadi Janki, who I think many of you know and have heard about, the former, spiritual leader of the Brahma Kumaris. She said to me, I asked Dadi, I said, was I suppressing the feelings? She said, you weren't suppressing, but you weren't being bodiless, so it had its impact. So that was such a great teaching for me. I wasn't bodiless, and so now I'm experiencing the impact of what happened, even though at the time it seemed I passed through it very, very easily and very well. So we need to practice this bodiless stage. And yeah, it's all tied up in being able to experience that state of the mystic, that state of being surrendering the will, staying connected to the divine, having those very beautiful and out of this world experiences. And what I mean by out of this world, it's not so, what I experienced once or over some time was my heart opening. And in India, they talk about opening the chakras. I'm not sure if that's what was happening because I haven't gone into that. But at one point in my journey, I was feeling so much love from God that it was almost as if my heart was aching, like it was being stretched. That was the experience. My heart was being stretched because there was so much love coming in, I couldn't contain it. And so that was the stretching. And I was in an interesting stage at that time. It lasted for probably a week or so. But whenever I was alone, I would say to the divine, okay, we're alone now. Come on. And it was this experience of powerful, amazing love that I had not experienced before. Really like opening my heart to a level of love that was overpowering. And they say in electronics, they talk about Ohm's law, OHM, and it's the source divided by our resistance. So here we're talking about Ohm's law. It is actually spelled AUM, but we often spell it OM. So Ohm's law is the same, the source divided by our resistance. And so when there's no resistance, it's the full power, like with electronics. If there's no resistance, if we didn't pare it down to the 220, the 110, then our machinery could explode. But, probably we are scared a bit to explode, but slowly even opening ourselves more and more to the unlimited power of the unlimited source. And so the mystic is the journey into the unlimited, into, going beyond what some people say, people, things, and time. Because people, things, and time are all on this physical plane and limited. When we go beyond people, things, and time, we can go into the unlimited. So probably I've shared quite a bit. I can always come back to something, but let's have a little bit of interaction, Q&A.
Thank you for that, Maureen. That was a very interesting talk. I was just reading your book, A Western Woman Colored by Eastern Ways. And I can see that very in a practical way from your sharing. I just want to pick up some of the aspects that you mentioned in your talk. Comfort zone. People do get into a comfort zone. They feel very secure when they get into a situation where everything is routine, nothing changes. Is that a good thing or not? Or because you said sometimes it's good to get out of your comfort zone.
I feel it's quite spiritually dangerous to live in a comfort zone because we're not allowing ourselves to be challenged. And so I think that's part of the reason why I embraced Asia, because I was mostly out of my comfort zone, mostly. And I think that that's very good for me. Like even the weather, it was often like, 40 degrees. It was very uncomfortable, noisy. Of course, there's beautiful things about Asia, but, it's a larger population. Australia's very comfortable, scary in a way to settle in here because it is very comfortable. Even where I am now, it's very comfortable. And that's why even like an invitation like this to do a public talk at 4 a.m., that's out of a comfort zone. So I really hesitate to ever say no to anything that will take me out of my comfort zone, because that comfort zone for me is very dangerous because it will impede my progress. I don't know that we can really progress spiritually if we're in a comfort zone.
If some people are trapped in their comfort zone, but sometimes it's taken away, and we can see that's happening in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine. You get used to a certain lifestyle and suddenly it's taken away from you. Is there something that we can do to prepare ourselves so that we're actually making that conscious choice?
Oh, absolutely. Like even here at the retreat center, our rooms, for the guests are very comfortable, very beautiful. But some people feel they need a double bed. We have single beds, of course. And, I've told the people who, are bringing like the people from the former organization, tell people it's a bit different. We've separated the beds. Even couples are in single beds. This is already going out of a comfort zone. And I think as much as we can embrace, rather than saying, oh, I couldn't sleep because I'm not used to being in a single bed. Most people who live alone choose to have double beds now. We can get too comfortable. And even because everything was already here. So even the dunas are a little bit thick. They're heavy and warm, but some people feel they're too heavy, and they say, I couldn't sleep because the duna was too heavy. And it's like, do we replace the dunas that are so good and so warm, or is it a case of letting people adjust? Because when you go to an ashram, often you're sleeping on the floor, you're eating out of tin plates. I mean, it's nothing like that, sharing a room with 20 people as we do when we go to India sometimes. I think whenever we can go outside our comfort zone, it's a good thing for us. And I don't just mean physically. Sometimes it's not getting the respect that we're used to. We're used to a certain, level of respect. So when we're out of that comfort zone, just seeing how we adjust to that, because every time, I would say every time we're outside our comfort zone, it's an opportunity to grow.
The one thing I really enjoyed about is what you said. You have a thought, and within 48 hours, things
Always.
happen. I think a
Yes.
lot of people must be thinking, well, how do you do that? How do you make actually you have this thought and then it sort of manifests itself in a real way?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's about not making it happen. That's why it all started with that thought. Few leaders realize how little they have to do. So the thought comes and I just let it happen, or not. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But like for another example, I was in Korea and meeting a lot of very interesting people. And a month later, Daddy Janki was coming there, and so the center said, "Oh, can you come back? It'd be great if all these people would come and meet Daddy." And I said, "Yeah, that would be great, but let's see if you don't have money for the ticket, and nor do I. But let's just see what happens." I was in Cambodia, living in Cambodia at that time. And again, within 48 hours, I received an invitation to attend an interfaith conference in Korea that ended the day before Daddy Janki arrived. And it was, the ticket was covered. I mean, how does that happen? Tell me. I can't even, you couldn't work it out. You couldn't make it happen, but it happens all the time. It's just incredible.
I mean, you talked about the truck, you talked about that 10 cents that you found, and you talked
Yeah.
about the air ticket. Now, if I say I want a Ferrari, will that happen, or is it a slightly different motive behind that?
Yeah, it's not just the motive, but it just comes quite naturally. It's not a desire. It's not a desire. I think I've questioned whether I am creating destiny or I am picking up what's in my destiny. I don't even know that. I think what's happening is it's in my destiny and I'm just aligning with that destiny. So that's why it's so smooth.
What
Because,
I've observed
yeah,
in you, Maureen, is that you seem to have a very simple approach. It's not complicated.
not complicated. Yeah, not complicated. Like that, not thinking, it sounds, it's actually sometimes I think, am I being lazy? Because I don't make a lot of effort. I create the thought, hold that pure intention somewhere, not even intensely. I don't even necessarily meditate for it. I just put it out there. And quantum physics says it very beautifully. They say that there's a quantum field with unlimited possibilities, and we just have to pick one up. And it seems like that. It seems as easy as that. It does come very easily.
Well, it seems like you come very easily with your connection with the divine. You talked about God, and most people tend to sort of run away when you bring the subject of God, but you have actually embraced it, and you think, like you talked about touchings. How do you do this?
Again, I don't. It just comes like that. Go to Taiwan. I mean, where did that come from? It was so clear and it worked. It was amazing how it just, and also there was a retreat, a Call of the Time retreat in Philippines. After I had this touching, 5 out of the 20 participants that attended that in the Philippines with Charlie, Brother Charlie, were from Taiwan, invited by Peter Senge. And it's like, how did 5 people arrive there from Taiwan with no one there in Taiwan? And they became the instruments to help everything happen. So how everything aligned for that to come about. And even the house I rented, it was next door to that woman I knew. And I could take it on a month by month rent. And it was right next door to the one person I knew in Taiwan. So she was very helpful and supportive. So, but didn't speak Chinese either. I mean, the language was really something interesting. But yeah, how it all just happens, don't ask me. But it works, all I'm saying, and that's what I'm telling you, it works
I just want to
magically.
explore this a little bit further, Maureen. You talked about mysticism. You talked about being mystics on the edge, and you introduced the word yogi. Can anyone do this? And if so, how?
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. That's why I studied a bit of neuroscience, because it just put kind of a logic also behind what I was experiencing, you know? And so, um, yeah, like one of the things I read was saying that positive thought is like creating a magnetic field and it attracts, but you have to have the feeling, right? Positive thought is creating this magnetic field, but you have to have the feeling of it to attract it to you. So it's not enough just to have a positive thought. You have to feel that you're already in it, that it's already done, that it's, yeah, like that feeling of going to Oxford. I felt I could see myself there and I felt, yeah, I'm meant to be there. It was just a feeling. I didn't even create it. It was just, yeah, I'm meant to be there. And it worked, you know. So it's not only positive thinking, but we have to align our feelings with the thoughts so that it comes together.
Now, you also mentioned about being the bodiless stage, and you gave some very good examples, especially about that 19-year-old who had that accident, but seems to
Yeah.
have been detached, and whereas the other situations. When we're being bodiless, what does that actually mean? I mean, you must have experienced this practicing it over some 45 years. How has that helped you?
Yeah, I think those experiences that I mentioned, seeing someone in incredible, excruciating pain, made me think I better get this practice in place because we just never know when we're going to need to get detached from the body. And also, if we are not fully here, and we can get those touchings, it seems we get guided at that time. You know, we just seem to be able to move in the right direction, say the right thing. It just drops in from somewhere. And I've got many, many examples of how that has happened. Like that lady who got the idea to just be Kali. Where did that come from? I mean, of course, she's been to India, she has some idea of that, but that thought that came really saved her. Where did it come from? You know, and this does come when we are not so attached to the physical. We've got a little bit of space there to perceive and receive.
You've been on your journey for some 45 years on this spiritual awakening that you're talking about. And what have you really discovered about yourself, and what sustained you for so long?
Sustained me. Well, I think once you start to open to truth, there's no going back, you know, so I don't think there's a choice. I don't think there's ever been a choice to close my eyes. That would be the only way to stop the journey, to close my eyes again. And I just, once you've opened them, you can't close them. It's in fact, they open more and more, whether you like it or not.
I think you've got a amazing story that you've put down in words. And just for our benefits, our viewers, you can get this book, Mystic on the Edge, from Amazon, and also the BK's website, inspiredstillness.com. So, Maureen, time flies, even if you're in Melbourne. Would you like to take us onto that journey of being detached, of being bodiless. Give us
Mm.
that experience when we can connect with ourselves and the divine.
Yeah, thank you for that, this chance. Yes. So just to now imagine the self as a tiny point of energy, of non-physical light, a little like the picture behind me, but tiny, infinitesimal, soft, gentle light that sits where they show the third eye in the center of the forehead. So just bring all your attention here to this point. When we concentrate our awareness, we draw in all the power and concentrate the power of thought through awareness. The being, the light, the life force, the soul is separate to the body. The body is my instrument, my costume through which I play out my part on the world drama stage. But I'm not the body. I'm an eternal being. I can never die. I'm the life force within the body. And on the wings of thought, I can travel through imagination. I now imagine myself in a world of light, very soft, subtle, golden red light. And I am just a being of light in a world of light. Nothing but light all around. Silence and light. I feel the presence of the Supreme, the soul beyond, Param Atma, the soul beyond, beyond the physical. And so, ever silent, ever pure, peaceful, beyond. This is union, yoga, the mystical connection. Where I open myself to unlimited possibilities, where I go beyond any limitations and can access my inner power, the power of the soul, spirit. Everything I need is within myself. Peace, love, wisdom, power. And being here in the presence of the divine helps me to realize and experience who I am. To believe that I'm much more than the physical. According to my awareness, so will be my power. So as I bring my thoughts back to my body, to the room in which I'm sitting, let me maintain awareness that everything I need is within myself. And just think of one thing you need to deal with that this awareness will help you with. And apply it as you come back to your daily life. Om, I am Shanti, peace, silence. Om Shanti.
Thank you for that, Maureen. That was a very wonderful experience. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank you. Thank you for your time. I know it's in the early hours of the morning in Australia. You're preparing for the day. We're preparing to go to sleep. And I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us today. And for next week's topic, we have balancing worldly pressure with spiritual practices with Dr. Pavan Kumar. So I do hope that you can have another fascinating insight into spirituality. So thank you once again, Maureen, and thank you to everyone else. And have a wonderful day, evening, wherever you are. Om Shanti.
Thank you. Om Shanti.
Thank you. Om Shanti.
All my fellow mystics. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.